Hello everyone, Muhammad Adil here, and today we'll be talking about the axillary artery. Now let's get started. Here you can see that I've drawn the coracoid process of the scapula, to which is attached the pectoralis minor. Now the pectoralis minor is the key muscle associated with the axillary artery, in a way that the axillary artery it crosses behind the pectoralis minor, and in doing so it is divided into three parts. The part that is before the pectoralis minor is the first part. The part that is behind the pectoralis minor is the second part, and that which is after the pectoralis minor is the third part. Now let's look at how the axillary artery is. What is the axillary artery? The axillary artery is the continuation of the subclavian artery. When the subclavian artery passes or crosses the outer border of the first rib, it is then known as the axillary artery, and it passes through the axilla, and after crossing the lower border of the teres major muscle, it is then called as the brachial artery. So the axillary artery is between the outer border of the first rib and the lower border of the teres major. Okay, now that we've done the parts of the axillary artery, let's look at the branches. Now the first part of the axillary artery has one branch, the second part has two branches, and the third part has three branches. The first part which has only one branch, and it is the superior thoracic artery, also known as the highest thoracic artery. The second part gives two branches known as the thoracoacromial artery and the lateral thoracic artery. The third part gives three branches: the subscapular artery, the anterior circumflex humeral artery, and the posterior circumflex humeral artery. Now those are the branches. Now look at the relations of the different parts of the axillary artery. In the first part, anteriorly there is the pectoralis major, posteriorly there is the long thoracic nerve, and also some part of the serratus anterior, which is not that important. Laterally there are the three cords of the brachial plexus, and medially there is the axillary vein. Now in the second part, anteriorly there is the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. Posteriorly there is the posterior cord and the subscapularis. Laterally there is the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. Medially there is the medial cord and the axillary vein. Now looking at the third part, which is a little bit more complicated than the first and second part. Anteriorly there is the pectoralis major and the median root of the median nerve, that is the median contributing root of the median nerve. Posteriorly there is the subscapularis, the tissmus dorsi, teres major, axillary, and the radial nerve, which both arise from the posterior cord. Laterally there is the coracobrachialis, biceps, humerus, and the musculocutaneous nerve, and also the lateral root of the median nerve. Now medially there is the ulnar nerve, medial cutaneous nerve of arm, and of course the axillary vein. Now the relations may look a bit complicated, but there are certain patterns that you can see. such as the axillary vein lies medially to all the three parts of the axillary artery. You can look at here, there's the axillary vein medially in the first part, then in the second part, and then in the third part, which is pretty obvious because the axillary vein remains medial to the axillary artery in all its course. And you can also see that anteriorly there's always the pectoralis major in all the three parts. And in the second part, which actually is the part of the axillary artery which is behind the pectoralis minor, so it is obvious that in the second part there will be pectoralis minor anteriorly. Also, you may see that laterally in the first part the three cords of the brachial plexus are present, which is obvious and pretty simple to remember. Now in the second part, the three cords of the brachial plexus gain their name by going there at their respective sides of the axillary artery. For example, posteriorly there is the posterior cord, laterally there is the lateral cord, and medially there is the medial cord. And in the third part, this is a little tricky to remember, but in the third part you can see that the certain branches of the brachial plexus, such as the axillary and the radial nerve, because the axillary and the radial nerve are actually branches of the posterior cord, so they are related posteriorly. And the same goes for other branches. For example, the musculocutaneous nerve arises from the lateral cord, so it is related laterally. And the same goes for the ulnar nerve, because it arises from the medial cord of the brachial plexus, so it is related medially. I hope this was helpful in your understanding, improving your understanding of the axillary artery. Give me your feedback in the comments. Muhammad Adil, over and out.